sticking with. This is our final message on about walking with God. And today we're talking about walking with God, how walking with God impacts our life and work. And so our whole life. And so we're going to look at a pretty familiar story from the Bible, and I'm going to read a few verses at the outset here, and then we'll be referring to many other verses throughout the message. And so let's read 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 1 through 7. This is a story of David and Goliath, and so we're gonna look at facing giants. And I think what's in front of us right now is kind of a giant, and we maybe don't have 100% sense of exactly how to address that giant. And so we're kind of learning as we're going, and it's kind of the situation David found himself in as well. And so let's look at this scripture. It says, "Now the Philistines had gathered their forces for war. They occupied one hill, and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. A champion named Goliath from Gath came out of the Philistine camp. He was a giant of a man, over 9 feet tall, wearing a huge bronze helmet and a coat of bronze armor that weighed over 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leggings and slung a huge bronze javelin over his back. The iron spearhead alone weighed 15 pounds, and a soldier with a large shield always walked in front of Goliath." A couple of lessons from David facing Goliath I just want to point out before we kind of dive into our outline itself. And one of those is that David himself was two different aspects I want to point out from the backdrop of the story. One is David had been anointed to be the king of Israel before this occurred. Now understand, David's still, he's a teenager at this time. A lot of people think maybe about 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. And so he's a very young guy. And whenever Samuel, whenever it became known that Saul was not going to continue as the king of Israel and his line was going to be broken, then God asked Samuel the prophet to set out and anoint someone new as a king. So Samuel went to David's father, Jesse. Jesse had a bunch of boys. And so he brought all of his boys, well, almost all of his boys, out to Samuel and presented them for him to choose who it was going to be the next king. And Samuel, a man of great discernment, a true prophet of God, looks and talks and walks through this whole group of guys. And at the end, he says, "Do you not have another son?" In other words, God's Spirit was not telling him, "Hey, you got one here," even though some of them were impressive and that kind of thing. It was like David had this, or Samuel had this constraint in him. You haven't found the right guy here. So he says, "Do you have another one?" And Jesse goes, "Well, I mean, the run of the crowd. I mean, little David. I mean, we have him out keeping sheep. I mean, we didn't even bother calling him in. He's the youngest. I mean, he's the least important here or whatever." And Samuel said, "Well, I think you better go ahead and call him in." And so they call him in, and right away Samuel realizes this is the guy. This is the guy. Now understand, he's still a teenager. He's still a kid, but and he wasn't viewed by his family as somebody that was going to be the next king. But Samuel saw something that God saw, and that was, this is the guy, this is the man. And so he anointed him. So David had been anointed king, and then David was even too young to go to sign up for the army. He has 3 older brothers who had signed up for the army. They were out here fighting in the battle, and where this scenario took place. And just to get a little bit of the picture of it, the Israelites lived in the kind of the mountainous area where Jerusalem and various cities like that were associated. And then over by the Mediterranean Sea, where Tel Aviv is today, is where the Philistines were from. And they had marched over to kind of the valley for those mountains and had set up, and Saul had heard about it, so he comes out with his army, and they're at the base of the mountain there. And so there's this plain, this valley kind of in between, and these two armies are just sitting there. And David didn't get to go because he's home watching sheep. But one day his dad said, hey, I think we better send some supplies over to the army of Israel. So he loads up cheese and all kinds of things to send over some food for him, for the army, and sends David as a messenger boy to take this stuff to his brothers and to King Saul. And so David pulls up with his load of goods, and he sees giant Goliath come out 2 different times and defy the army of Israel. And David saw that, and something struck him in his spirit. And he realized that the people, his brothers and the other soldiers, were scared. They were over there kind of shaking, trembling when Goliath would speak out and speak to them. They were in fear. They were just living in total fear. And when the giant would come down, they would just kind of like, their teeth would rattle. I mean, they were just, and David's looking around at this and going, something's wrong with this picture. And so David, even though he was a shepherd boy, I need to let you know he was a certain kind of warrior already at this point. Now, whenever you think of David and Goliath, I don't know what you think of whenever you think that David shot him with a slingshot. But oftentimes when you think of a slingshot, you think of like probably one, it's a toy you got your son at too young of age and you regretted it. You know, pull back, got a rock in it, and boom, you know, one of your windows is out and stuff like that. But see, those kind of slingshots, even though they can be kind of dangerous and cause a lot of problems, they typically don't kill people, or most parents would be dead, you know. And so the truth is, that's not what David had, okay? There's been some research done in the kind of sling that he had, and the kind of sling that he had wasn't a slingshot, it was a sling. And I was doing some reading on it, and that sling could make about, a person who was good with that could make about 6 rotations in a second. And the velocity that the rock, if they had the right kind of rock, the velocity of that rock when it hit something, and I forget right now what this, I hadn't written down what the speed of that was, but there's people who have researched this stuff and gone back and said if it's can go that many cycles in that amount of time, and this is what speed it can have, and this is the impact it would have. And so it would actually be the impact of like a 45 shooting. So so even though we look at David and we're going, well, he's so ill-equipped, and he's so you got to understand he was probably better equipped than what we sometimes think of him as being. And that doesn't take away the miraculous part of this story, okay? The fact is that the giant lay dead and that David is a victor. But it does tell you that whenever David rejected all the other things that came to him, that he had a pretty good understanding. If you remember, he said he had killed a lion, he'd killed a bear, and you know that wasn't with his bare hands. It was he'd used this sling, and this was actually a weapon that was used in warfare. And it was a little bit more of a precise weapon that was used whenever other kinds of things weren't going to be that useful. So David was a warrior, even though he wasn't trained in battle, he had been trained kind of in what you call everyday life. And sometimes that everyday life training may be the best training. You know, we call it the mop bucket training. And you know, so whenever, if you can learn how to do certain things in the day-to-day, it helps to prepare you for the hard things in life. And so even the kind of situation we're facing right now with this is, if you've learned how to cope with setbacks, as I was saying in my prayer this morning, and for the message here, for some financial setbacks, for some other things that happen, if you've learned how to cope with those and deal with those in proper manner, you're really equipped to deal with what's going on right now. And you don't have to hit that panic button, because you've learned that God is in control, and I can do certain things, and there's sometimes things I can't do. And at that point, I have to trust God with the results. You know, if we can fix something, then we have a responsibility to fix it. If we can do something, we have a responsibility to do it. But there are some things that we're not able to fix or control, and that's where we trust God with everything, but that's where we have to simply say, God, I don't know what to do, and I don't accept this. I am going to trust you. And so David, he wasn't equipped with all the warfare stuff that they had used, that they did in warfare so much. But he said, look, I've killed a bear and I've killed a lion with this sling. And with God's help, I mean, if God's on my side, that's really the big thing. I can take out this giant too. And so then the other piece of this is there's some guy who had done quite a bit of research about the giant. You know, he was led down into the valley each day, and as a giant, oftentimes there are some physical challenges that come with giantism. There's another term for it. I didn't memorize that term. So, but it's there's generally a physical condition that causes people to be giants, and that wrestler of more recent times or whatever that was from Canada, I think. What was his name? Andre the Giant. He had this it's a thyroid issue that caused him to grow to the size that he was, that kind of thing. And so, but there are some physical limitations that come with that too. And sometimes there can be eyesight. And this giant, notice he's told David, come to me. In other words, you get close enough, buddy, all I have to do is fall on you. You know, I got all this armor, everything else, man, you're dead. But David didn't go by the plan. David switched some things up. And first of all, he didn't come in armor. And also the giant said to him, he said, you know, you come to me with sticks, like I'm a dog. Well, David only had a staff. He had a staff with him. He only had one staff. So there's some thought that the giant's vision was not the greatest, and he was seeing double and that kind of thing. And so he had his vulnerabilities, but he looked fierce. And obviously, you know, not the kind of guy you want to run into an alley without a good slingshot or a good 45 or something, you know. But at the same time, one of the things that I want to point out to you from this is that sometimes things look scarier than they should be to us. And so this giant was scaring the daylights out of Army. I mean, he was 9 feet tall, obviously, and he had all this armor on, everything else, you know, just had this little piece right here. That's all David needed. But, you know, the way the other people were doing battle, it wasn't going to work out too well. If they went in with a javelin and they went in with a spear and a sword, it wasn't going to work out. And yet David approached him on terms what he knew how to do and what he could do, and God worked through that. And so I just want to say, you know, I wish I had all the answers for this virus, and I wish I had, you know, everything to say, well, this is what you should do, what you shouldn't do, how we should do it all. You know, I don't have those answers, but I do know this. I do know that God has equipped us to respond and deal with hard things and crises and difficulties in a way that will honor Him, and I would like to say will serve us best. And so let's go on and look at some other giants that David faced in this process of going to fight the giant. So this is where your outline comes in. We're going to give you a few of these right now. First one is delay. His dad held him back. I mentioned to you that his 3 other brothers enlisted in Saul's army, but David was held back to care for the sheep in Bethlehem. And so his dad held him back. Now here he is, anointed king of Israel. He's the anointed king of Israel. He's the one to be the king of Israel. And yet, he can't even go to the battle. His older brothers enlisted, they're going to go to the battle. Well, he was anointed king. I mean, what? No, you keep the sheep. Sometimes delays are good things, because it's in delays that God is preparing us for what He has for us. And so I want to say, let's not despise delays. You might feel frustrated. You might feel like, man, this is, you know, whatever. But even and I think as Tom said, different ones have said, you know, even if they're, you know, let's just say that that schools do close down, okay, and your kids are home. And I told Tom yesterday, I said, you guys are way ahead of the curve. You know, everybody's going to be homeschooling before you know it, but you guys started way out there ahead. You know, but everybody may be homeschooling here shortly. But instead of seeing that as a major problem or obstacle, to try to think in creative ways of what can we do to make the best of this? What can we do to make this work? And so here's what I do want to tell you. I want to tell you that this time period will pass. And what we do with it, I don't want to waste any days. You know, sometimes someone say, well, I can't wait till summer gets here. Well, I may be tired of cold weather, and it's funny when we get to summer, in the middle of summer, we're going, well, I can't wait till it gets colder. You know, here, if all you're doing is wishing it was another time or wishing that a bunch of days were gone, you're just wishing your life away. So it may be really hot today. Well, get in some air conditioning, okay? You know, I mean, but enjoy today. It may be really cold and you're wishing it was warmer, but enjoy today. We're going to have to enjoy. So if your kids come home and they're home for 2 weeks or home for 2 months or, you know, whatever it ends up being, make memories out of this time that you'll look back and say, and it might be one of the most beneficial times of your life. Because you know what's going to happen? Your kids are going to move up. They're going to grow up and move away. They're going to move out of the house anyway. At least you hope they do. Some of them are kind of hanging out a long time these days. But, you know, but hopefully they will move out at some point. They're going to grow up. They're going to move on. This could be an opportunity for you to maximize on some things that you didn't know you would have the opportunity to do. And I could sit here and give you a bunch of ideas, things to do. I'm not going to do that because, for one thing, time. Second thing is that I think you're creative enough to do that yourself. Number 2, discouragement. Everyone was afraid. Every day, Goliath would stand and shout at the ranks of Israel's army, why do you come out here and line up for battle? Choose one man to fight me. If he's able to kill me, we'll become your subjects. But if I kill him, you'll become our subjects and serve us. Day after day, Goliath taunted them, saying, this day I defy the ranks of Israel. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, everyone was deeply shaken and paralyzed with fear. Paralyzed with fear. And they all ran to the store and got more toilet paper. No, I'm just, you know, it's just, but I mean, those are the symptoms of how fear takes over and going like, man, I'm not using corn cobs. I'm not, I'm going to be ready for this one, you know. But when fear takes over, it's amazing what we do, what things that we do. And, you know, and I'm not saying don't have enough toilet paper, but as Tom said, share with your neighbor if you're the one who emptied the shelves. For 40 days, twice a day, morning and evening, the Philistine giant loudly berated the Israelite army. You talk about wearing these guys down. And notice they were paralyzed with fear. David talked to his brothers on the front line. He saw Goliath, or as he did, he saw Goliath first shouting his usual threats to Israel's army. When the army heard Goliath, they all ran away in terror. I mean, here David comes down here thinking, I was anointed to be king of this bunch. I'm going to be king of a bunch of scaredy cats. These guys are scared for their lives. They're run away in terror. And so discouragement, he faced discouragement. Like, man, this is really a rough situation, a difficult situation. Number 3, disapproval. His brother questioned his motive. David asked, what's the reward for killing this Philistine and ending this disgraceful abuse? When David's older brother heard this, he burned with anger at David and said, why are you even here anyway? Why aren't you taking care of your scrawny little flock of sheep, you cocky little brat? I know how conceited you are. Now, what have I done, said David. Can I even ask a question? So here he is going, you know, and I'm going to have to give David this. David was looking at this from a standpoint of going, this guy's defying the armies of God, but he did ask a pretty smart question. He would have passed your financial peace university class, Tom. He said, hey, what is there a reward for this? What's the payout here for this? You know, what's coming to a guy if he does this? And there was a reward. And one of the greatest rewards, I mean, you know, he was going to get one of the king's daughters as a wife, but he wouldn't have to pay. Whoever killed him wouldn't have to pay taxes the rest of their lives. Man, you'd have thought that would have cost somebody to go to the head of the line already. You know, going like, man, I'd rather die than pay taxes the rest of my life. And if I kill this guy, then I'm free. You know, I mean, that would have been pretty good incentive. But have you ever had some, don't raise your hand and don't look at anybody funny or anything else. But, you know, oftentimes where we get the greatest disapproval from, it matters the most to us are the people we know the best. Sometimes it's even family members. Sometimes it might even be a sibling. And here David is being faith-filled and saying, you know, what's going on? And his brother's like accuses him of having really impure motives and puts him down. He faced great disapproval. It's your oldest brother? That's even harder, because there is a little bit of, Rick's my oldest brother. And I think any of my brothers could say something that would, could hurt me pretty deeply if they chose to. But, I always felt like Rick always looked out for me too. He's looking out for me. So if he turned on me, it's like, man, I must really be messing up here, Number 4, doubt. The expert doubted his ability. Don't worry about a thing, David told the king. Here David is, this teenager. He's walking into the king and goes, hey, don't worry about a thing. I'll fight this Philistine. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can go against a Philistine. You're only a boy, and he's been a professional warrior all his life. I mean, what do you think you're even saying here, kid? So Saul, if anybody was an expert, he'd pretty much been in battle his whole time as a king, and been in battle with these people, the Philistines, a lot of the time. And he's saying, man, what are you talking about? You're a child, and this guy is a seasoned warrior. He's been at this a long time. And so those are obstacles that each of us can face, and they are obstacles that are actually even akin to some of the things we're dealing with right now. And I do think, I would say this, it's very important who you listen to in this season, and certainly we want to make sure we listen to the experts, but we have to make sure they're really experts. There are a lot of people claim to be experts that aren't very expert, and don't have great expertise, or sometimes they're seeing things through a very narrow lens. And so we have to be discerning and wise. And I just want to encourage you, for you and your family and for us as a church, to be as discerning as wise as we can in these times, and say, hey, we're not going to overlook good advice, and we're not going to run away from good advice, but we're going to be discerning. We're really going to try to understand what it is that God would have us to do. And conventional wisdom can be good, but you'd be surprised how many times conventional wisdom is wrong. Conventional wisdom oftentimes is wrong. And we live in a world where we believe the majority rules. We believe in that. We believe in that very strongly as a nation. But the majority is not always right. And so I just want to encourage you to remember that all of life is a battle. We're in a battle. And in this battle, we have choices to make. And in those choices, that we first and foremost make sure we honor God. David didn't go in and say this glibly to the king. It can sound like it. Don't worry about anything. I'll fight this Philistine. He was speaking out of a heart of faith. He was speaking out of a confidence in God. And that's where we need to rest our confidence, is in God. Now, I want to just briefly, here in closing, talk about how to defeat giants. Remember how God's helped me in the past. We don't know how this is all going to play out for us. But I want to say this. That is, God has brought us as a nation, he's brought us as individuals through a lot of things. And so I want to encourage you to just remember what God has done for you in the past. Here's what David said about his situation. He goes, in protecting my sheep, I've killed both a lion and a bear. The Lord who delivered me from the teeth of that lion and the claws of that bear will surely now deliver me from this Philistine too. And so his confidence, he was confident in two things. He was confident in God. He was also confident in his own ability. And I want to encourage you to this. You haven't gotten to this point in your life by being an idiot. You've gotten to this point in your life because of, you maybe have a period of time in your life where you go, that was pretty much like an idiot. And most of us have had that too. But, you're here today because you've made some good choices, and you're making good choices. And you're going to continue to do that. And you're confident. You have confidence in yourself. Just because everybody else is doing something or saying something, I don't like to be reactionary, but I like to be aware of why I'm doing what I'm doing, not just caught up in the moment. And so make sure that you're confident in your own thinking, but you're confident, your true confidence rests in the Lord. David said, I am sure that the Lord who delivered me from the teeth of the lion, claws of the bear, will now deliver me from this Philistine. His confidence was in God. His greatest confidence was in God, but he understood that God had given him ability too. So don't forget those two things. Your greatest confidence is God, but God's given you a brain. He's given you the ability to think and come up with ideas that will best serve you and your family. Number two, use the tools God has given me now. Saul dressed David in his own armor. David said, I cannot go out in these because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Instead, he chose 5 smooth stones for his sling. Now, in this situation, what Saul was saying is, this is the way you do battle. But the truth was, that wasn't how David had fought his battles. And truthfully, that was how the giant was going to fight the battle. If David had gone down there for regular battle, he was going to lose. Because like I said, all the giant had to do was fall on him, and it's over. I mean, he didn't even have to fight him in a way. He just fall on him, and this is over. So and so David's strategy was totally different. It's like, this is how God has used me. This is how he's worked in my life. And this is what I'm uncomfortable with trying to do it in a way other than what I'm used to and what I know. Now, that doesn't mean we don't try new things, but I want to say this, and that is sometimes we try to jump too far ahead. We try to say, well, I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, try to do something we're not equipped to do. David was equipped to use the sling, which was a mighty weapon, a very mighty weapon. He was equipped to do. He was not equipped to wear Saul's outfit, which didn't fit him in the first place, and then was going to weigh him down and cause him to lose this battle. And so use the tools God has given me now. What is at your disposal? We don't know. We might all face some financial setbacks in this time period. Tom was talking about, your 401k or anything you have in stocks or that kind of thing. If you look at it, I heard someone the other day say, stop looking at the screen. Don't just sit there and stare at the screen and watch this thing going all over, whatever. Just again, this isn't we just have to, and you go, I might lose my job. This might happen. There's a lot of things that could happen. But what I want to tell you is God has helped you through a lot, or you wouldn't be here today. He's going to help you through this too. He's going to help me through this. He's going to help us as a church through this. And so use the tools God has given us now. Use it in the wisest, best way we can. Number 3, ignore the dream busters. This is actually from another passage a little bit further down the road. It's not the same story, but it's a really fascinating story, and it's one worth to read. So if you have a little extra time in your hands, you might want to read through all of Samuel, but particularly chapter 30, a really, really fascinating story where David's own men were about ready to turn on him because their wives and their children had been taken captive. And so they were just shaken. In fact, David was shaken. All of them were shaken. But the men were looking at him and going like, we're going to stone you, man. They were ready to take him out because this had happened to their families when they were out with him. And David, in this moment, and I'm pretty sure in this moment facing Goliath too, here's what he did. It says, when others were speaking against him, David encouraged himself in the Lord. There are sometimes whenever nobody else is going to encourage you. Everything you hear is going to be doomsday, And here's what I'm going to tell you is, it goes back to what C.S. Lewis said, and that is, we can sit around and doomsday ourselves, into a hysteria, or we can find encouragement in the Lord and say, you know what, God, I believe you're with me. I believe you're alive. And this even though I have a life to live here and I plan to live it, have people that are counting on me, and we're going to take care of those things as best we can. What I do know is this, that one day this life will be over, and my hope is not in this life. My hope is in eternity that you provided for us. And so my hope is beyond what I have and see in front of me right now. And so David had to kind of dig deep here and go, well, it looks like they're going to stone me, they're going to kill me. He goes, and they're all against me and everything else. If I'm going to go forward here, if I'm going to have a plan of action, I'm going to have to find some encouragement. Otherwise, I'm going to despair like the rest of them, because he was pretty upset too. And so it says he encouraged himself in the Lord. I mean, you might just have to take a walk or get alone someplace and just say, God, this is a circumstance, it's a situation, and I need to go forward. I'm not going to go backward. I'm not going to give up. And so I need to find encouragement from you so I can take that next step. I can do a new one I need to do. And the amazing thing is, God gave him a really, really good solution, which is that's an amazing story. Go read that story this afternoon if you can. Number 4, Expect God to help me for his glory. David shouted to Goliath, you come at me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord Almighty. Today the Lord will conquer you, and the whole world will know that there is a God. And everyone will know that the Lord doesn't need weapons to rescue his people. It is his battle, not ours. The Lord will give you to us. So David had a part to play. He got his stones, he had his sling. He went into battle. And he had to sling that thing, and he had to release it and let it go. But what he knew was that in the truth of the matter, that this was God's battle, and that God was one who was going to be honored and glorified from it. And whenever we put God first in our lives, when we commit to him, and we do what we're doing for his glory, he will receive the glory, and people will see that God is alive. What we talked about earlier, just as individuals and as a church, my prayer for us is that God will, whether even if we're not able to meet together as we are, if there's things, restrictions put on that or things like that, my goal is for God to use us as a lighthouse. As I think Tim was praying this morning, when that darkness, when if things get dark, remember light shines the best in the darkness. And remember that God wants us to shine for his glory, for his good. And so be encouraged that in the midst of this crisis, whatever you want to call it, that God is alive and well. And he will give us the strength we need to face every challenge before us and each day. And so let's go into this week with faith and confidence in God and know that he's gonna carry us through this, and to be willing to be his light shining wherever we go.